Me? I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over. I'll speak to our negotiators. They want to negotiate. They're good people. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. But they have to come back to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time dealing with them. They're liars. I like that idea, sure. Well, this way, if it works out, I'm going to take the credit. If it doesn't work out, I'm blaming JD. You better be careful, JD.
Rabbi Wolicki, as always, an honor. Thank you.
Honored to be with you, Aaron.
I want to talk about JD Vance and Joe Rogan, but not a blow-by-blow. That's been done. And by the way, if you haven't seen that in detail, watch Rabbi Wolicki going through it, because that's brilliant. We can't emulate that kind of analysis and greatness. So thank you for that. What I want to do with you now is look at a couple of key parts, but the broader implications for JD Vance and his presidential prospects, for the Republican Party, for America, for Trump, for Israel, and also at the tactics that you have so cleverly identified that he is using. Let's start by looking at the bit that you have identified as the most problematic, the most troubling, the most what the hell. Let's watch now quickly.
And again, with limitations. Like when the Iranians hit ships, the president has been willing to knock the hell out of the Iranians in response. This is not just a negotiation. It's negotiation, it's military, it's all these things. But I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there have been people within the Israeli government who are trying to actually shift us away from that policy because they want to continue the military campaign. And by the way, there are people within their government that I love, I have good relationships with. I hope, and I don't think that they're part of this. I mean, the ambassador of Israel to the United States, I think, is actually a really good guy. Obviously, he cares about Israel first. I care about America first. But there are some people within their system we know beyond a shadow of a doubt who are manipulating and trying to change American public opinion to keep the war going on indefinitely. Again, not towards any objective, but just indefinitely.
So that's the first bit you sent me, Rabbi.
Okay, good.
Rabbi, particularly the end bit you say, your thoughts.
I just wanted to say the biggest thank you to all of those who have supported Me'er Panim since we started talking about the incredible work that they are doing. Over 650,000 warm meals they provide each year. Nothing works the way it used to in Israel. A lot of people are struggling financially. A lot of businesses have shut down in the aftermath. Kids are having to go off and join the IDF. Families are mourning and grieving. Some can't even afford to feed their kids. That is heartbreaking, looking at your child's eyes and knowing they're hungry and not being able to do a thing. And this is what Me'er Panim does. I've also received some screenshots from some of you showing me that you've been giving. It makes me really emotional. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys are incredible. I love to know that we're helping make a difference. So if you are able to give, it doesn't matter whether it's big or small, every little bit helps. Let me know. Send me a direct message. Again, just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone.
When he said there that those who were opposed to the MOU, that there's elements in the Israeli government who want war indefinitely. And then it wasn't just a slip of the tongue or some kind of, hyperbole in the moment, because he then doubled down and re-emphasized the point to Joe. You see at the end of the clip where he said, not for any specific objective, not for any defined objective, but indefinitely. Now, this is... it's basically a blood libel. What is he saying about us? There is not a single Israeli. There is not a single Israeli. I don't care how extreme and how right-wing an Israeli are. Let's say we're totally expansionist in our goals. The Greater Israel Project, all of the conspiracy theories are true. Let's say, still nobody wants war indefinitely here. The goal of Israel is to end the indefinite war that has been waged against us for decades since the founding of the State of Israel. That's the goal. The goal is once and for all to stop with the half measures and stopping short of actually defeating our enemies and be done with it. That's the goal. It's anything but indefinite war. If you want indefinite war, a great way to get indefinite war, Aaron, a great way is to continue to make deals like this and continue to throw bones and pretend that the incentives that motivate these jihadists are the same as Westerners. And if you just have the right dialogue and the right economic incentives, everyone's going to behave themselves. That's a recipe for indefinite war. It's offensive. It's offensive, and it's not true. There is no one who wants indefinite war.
He said, and the word explicitly, that is their position explicitly. I mean, that is
the other
a double
thing.
down. If I've ever seen that, it's crazy.
Saying that we should not be negotiating with Iran. We should just keep the military campaign going indefinitely. And that is their explicit position. And
again, peace through strength. The president refers to that constantly. This ain't peace through strength. You're spot on. The second part of this all of it was so poorly done. I don't know why he continues to do media, but I'm almost a fan of it because it exposes him. But this was the second part where he chose to blame Israel and apparently this coordinated paid campaign. And I saw something that led into this prior to this interview where someone made the point, when we announced this memorandum of understanding, we expected to have a lot of positive responses, but all of a sudden we were mind blown that there was a lot of negativity. How could anyone have been surprised by the reaction to a memorandum of understanding with terrorists? That was the obvious response. You don't need to pay me a cent to say the deal sucked. And the fact it's fallen apart is proof and testament to that. Let's watch this part, though, where he blames Israel essentially for his failing. Go.
But I definitely think you have seen this very discreet, extremely well-funded campaign to try to derail the negotiation and try to derail the deal. And, there's this Time article that came out yesterday. A friend sent it to me. It's worth reading because it lists a bunch of people who have quite literally been paid by a former Trump campaign person who was himself paid by certain elements within the Israeli government. And those people are attacking me viciously for quite literally trying to accomplish the negotiation objective that the president set for the country. So
what is their position? They're attacking you how?
Oh, it's social media posts. It's they're leaking to reporters. They're attacking me obsessively, saying that we should not be negotiating with Iran. We should just keep the military campaign going indefinitely. And that is their explicit position. And coming after me saying that, people have come after me and say that I'm influenced by Qatar, that I'm influenced by foreign governments, that, I take my marching orders from Tucker Carlson. And there's just so much bullshit out there when what I'm actually trying to do is accomplish what the President of the United States told me to accomplish, which is a settlement of this that accomplishes our objectives. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. We have the free flow of oil and gas. And I should be clear, I don't actually mind. I don't mind that let's say certain elements of the Israeli government want to criticize the deal or have disagreements about the deal. I don't even mind an effort to try to influence, foreign governments try to influence the United States all the time. Israel does it, other countries do it. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. What bothers me is actually when Americans meaning American leadership, allows that influence to affect their judgment and to affect what they are advocating for. That's what really bothers me. People are always going to try to influence the United States of America, whether they're allies of ours or whether they're enemies of ours. But again, when I open up the pages of Time magazine and I see that there's a literal foreign influence campaign being funded to tank the very deal that I was pursuing, and oh, by the way, many of the people who were receiving that money were actually attacking me in completely dishonest ways, my response to that is, well, go to hell. I'm going to do what I have to do for the American people. I represent Americans first.
Rabbi, it's a tale as old as time, isn't it?
Aaron, when you were teeing up this clip, you were talking about the flaws of it, how it was obvious to everyone to see the flaws of the memorandum of understanding. But what JD Vance did here in this clip is much craftier than that, because he went right to them these paid influencers were personally attacking him, which I don't believe is true. I don't think anyone has anything personal against JD Vance. And this is a classic left-wing tactic. One of the big distinguishing marks, and I say this proudly as a political conservative, that we like to say of ourselves as on the political right, is that we are interested in issues, and we are interested in facts, and we are interested in real arguments. And we correctly disparage the left for always strawmanning us by saying that, that this is offensive or this is a personal attack, which is a deflection play. The opposition to the memorandum of understanding from all quarters, and yes, we were angry about it, and yes, we were vocal about it, but the opposition was entirely about the content of the memorandum of understanding. And JD Vance pays zero, he gives zero credit, even to his detractors, meaning even when Joe Rogan in that clip says to him, so what was their argument? What was their argument, right? He doesn't then say their argument was that, we gave too much to the Iranians without demanding enough, that there was nothing definite about the nuclear program.
The terrorists a lifeline to survive.
He didn't, meaning I wouldn't expect him to fully accurately say his opponent's position. Just like if I said to you, what do those who argue with you say? We tend to bias it a little bit. I understand that. I wouldn't expect him to say it the way I would. But he went right. He didn't even address the opposition to the MOU in terms substantively, which all of the criticism was. It was all substantive criticism. This reminds me, way back when the MOU was first signed, and there were a lot of people in Israel who were upset about it. JD Vance, in his first press conference about it, was asked about the criticism coming out from Israel. He was actually asked specifically about the reports that Prime Minister Netanyahu was upset about it. And he said in that press conference that there were members of the cabinet, of Bibi's cabinet, who were attacking President Trump on a personal level for the MOU.
He's saying something to somebody else that he's not saying to me. What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you have seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the President of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path, but to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
That was false. The cabinet members in Israel, their public statements are all very easily accessible. And at the time, I remember I wasn't the only one. People searched, and it was totally false. But it was the same leftist tactic. Rather than deal with the substance of the argument, I'm gonna frame it as a personal attack, which itself automatically delegitimizes it in political discourse. It's a straw man argument, and JD Vance does this all the time.
But it's like Kamala Harris saying that she wasn't elected because she's black and she's a woman. No, it's because you sucked. You were horrific, but she turns it into something that she can't be held to account for. It's cheap and it's an easy way out. I tell you something that's not cheap. It's hilarious. Of course, the Babylon Bee did a headline off the back of JD Vance's interview with Joe Rogan. It said, "Brilliant politician JD Vance secures vote of 100% of nation's Tucker Carlsons." Because I'm trying to imagine, Rabbi, who that would appeal to and who would say, consume those 3 hours and say, he's my man. And look, I'm not American. I don't, claim to be, but I struggle to see how that helps him, except for that tiny group of people that we cover often when we chat, that woke right brigade.
Well, and it's a shrinking group. But
Yeah.
look, here's probably what he's thinking. First of all, he's probably ideologically part of that camp. Okay, at this point,
Agreed.
because the lack of political
All evidence points
wisdom,
towards it.
the lack of political wisdom that he's been displaying for quite some time is it's shocking. I mean, we've talked about this, Aaron. He is a political novice. We have to remember he's in way over his head. I mean, I'm just saying this purely as an
observation.
As an observation. I mean, his entire political career before being nominated, before being chosen by Trump to be his running mate, was a year and a half, a little less than a year and a half as a senator. That's it. That's his entire career as a legislator, as a politician. And because before that he had written a best-selling book. He had gone to Yale Law School. He had served in the Marines. He worked for Peter Thiel for a little bit. I mean, he didn't have a political career before that, and his lack of depth politically, his lack of understanding of electoral politics. Because you raise this Babylon Bee headline, as always, they're touching on a fundamental truth, which is that even if we concede the point that among younger conservatives there is a shift away from Israel and that there's a larger percentage of them who are not pro-Israel, that is correct, although it's a very mushy, shifty population, and I think it's actually shifting back in our direction right now. That's another topic. There's still a sizable portion there. He looks at them and says, that's the future. I'm going to go there. The problem is, from an electoral perspective, it's such a young population that there's still a small percentage of the Republican Party. And that's why in all the polling of the Republican Party, there's still overwhelming support for Israel and support for Trump, for the war in Iran. But again, the most shocking thing about all of this is that his inability to see any flaw in the memorandum of understanding and to blame it on Israel. And think about this. Think about this, Aaron. Why did the memorandum of understanding fall apart? It fell apart because the Iranians started shelling ships in the Strait of Hormuz. It had nothing to do with any influence campaign, meaning zero to do with any, because from a perspective of a pro-Israel advocate, the memorandum was signed. Trump then got behind it. We were all like, what on earth is going on? But it was moving forward. They then had the Luzerne conference where they moved forward to a second set of understandings based on the memorandum. They were progressing through this. The only reason it fell apart is for the reasons that we said it would fall apart, which is that Iran doesn't adhere to anything that they sign, and it was a silly deal. Is he blaming that on Israel?
It's the same as blaming Israel for Hezbollah attacking them non-stop since the ceasefire, and saying, Israel, you just got to stop, you just got to pull back. If only Israel would behave. What do you see as the impact of this? Does it have any impact on US-Israel relations? Is he influential enough to shift anyone's perspective who counts?
Here, I don't think this interview with Joe Rogan won him any new supporters. Let's put it that way. I don't think there's anyone who wasn't in the JD Vance camp and because of this Joe Rogan interview is now in that camp. Let's look at it that way. It's similar to the conversation that we had a while back about Tucker and Candace, and are they gaining any new followers at this point, or are they only slicing off portions of their audience? So when JD Vance does things like this, I just think it reminds people how amateurish he is. And, the contrast was so stark that this dropped on the same day that Secretary of State Rubio, which everyone assumes is going to be the other potential presidential candidate, was leading this conference on left-wing terrorism that brought together people from all over the world. And he gave a remarkable speech of talking with clarity about how globally that the left-wing violence in America and Islamic terrorism around the world are all part of the same problem. Without naming the Red-Green Alliance, he showed a kind of larger worldview, which really reflects the reality. People who see clearly know that if you're worried about Sharia taking over Texas and you're worried about what's happening in Europe with the Muslim takeover or what's happening in your country, Aaron, and the Muslims who are slaughtering Christians in Nigeria and October 7th and Iran, these are all one battle. This is all one struggle for Western civilization. And that clarity was so beautifully articulated by Marco Rubio yesterday. You hold that up with the contrast of this juvenile, petulant, it's like a temper tantrum, like, oh, they didn't like my deal. That becomes a personal attack. There was no personal attacks against JD Vance. There was an attack on a deal that was, meaning if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? If you're going to make a deal and you're going to cut Israel out of it, and you're going to, and Israel's not in the room, and the Israelis didn't even see an advance copy of it, and then as soon as it was announced, Prime Minister Netanyahu said, "We're not party to this," and then you're going to blame pro-Israel people who said this is a bad deal.
If you can be if this deal can fall apart because of a handful of online influencers, what kind of deal is that? I'd start with. I want to play a little clip of Rubio's speech for my audience, Rabbi.
More than 80% of radical violence is now driven by far-left and anarchist actors. These are not abstract statistics. Americans have seen what those numbers mean. An all-out assault on our immigration officers, sniper attacks, explosives, armed ambushes, a transgender shooter opening fire on Catholic elementary school students as they pray, his gun marked with slogans like, "Where is your God now?" A healthcare executive executed in cold blood in the streets, multiple assassination attempts on a sitting president, and the murder of the greatest conservative activist of a generation, a man who happened to also be a husband and the father of 2 young children, shot and killed while speaking to a crowd of students. This is a distinctive and unique evil. It has always been driven by a hatred, above all else, a hatred for civilization itself. It is a revolt of the worst against the best, a revolt of the weak and the cowardly against the strong and the good. It is perpetrated by those who cannot build, who cannot create, who cannot achieve great things, and take their revenge upon the world for their own inadequacy by seeking to destroy those who can. This is what radical leftism is. It may wear various different slogans and ideologies across place and time. They can call themselves anti-capitalist or anti-imperialist or communist or anarchist or Marxist, but the fundamental character is always the same. It's always the same. It is a poisonous resentment cloaked in the language of equality and justice and liberation, an overwhelming need to tear down what greater men have built, to wreck what is beautiful and what is right on behalf of people who are only filled with ugliness and have nothing else to offer the world. Through violence and through terror, they once again seek to impose their ugliness on all of us.
Before we go, a couple of other things I want to hit on. And I ask you this, Rabbi, because, and I don't know if I've given you credit or if I've seen you since, but you made that incredible prediction regarding this war and how Netanyahu and Trump, with their 2 vested interests, would clash. And this is prior to any reported clash. And it literally, I think it was 2 or 3 days later, blew up. You're very good at this. I want to ask you, moving forward, looking at JD Vance, looking at Rubio and Trump, put yourself in Trump's mind. I mean, he loves this kind of competition, I think. He loves pitting people against each other. He does it publicly. There are reports about how he did it with Rupert Murdoch in a room, and he said to Rupert, "Who would you pick? Who do you like more?" By the way, he picked Rubio. Smart man in some ways, not in all ways.
Marco does it with a velvet glove, but it's a kill, right? The result is the same. They do it very differently. And Marco, you really did yourself proud 2 days ago in Munich. In fact, so proud that I almost terminated his employ because they were saying, "Why can't Trump do this?" I do, but I say it differently. But Marco, don't do any better than you did, please. Because if you do, you're out of here. But no, he got, it was, I want my guys to do great. And the acclaim he's gotten and the acclaim JD gets is great. We have smart people.
How do you think Trump views what is going on at the moment, even just the JD Vance with Rogan? And how does he play this moving forward? Because he's obviously got his son, Junior, who is a big fan of JD and advocates heavily for him. Where do you think Trump's head is at?
Well, it's not just his son; it's also his son-in-law. Jared and Vance and Witkoff seem to be a kind of three musketeers who were the ones pushing more negotiations. But we can see that, you know, how Trump treated the MOU and what role Rubio played. Right after the MOU was signed, Rubio flew to the Gulf, and he had a summit meeting with the heads of the Gulf states. And at that summit meeting, they issued a statement, a joint statement of all the attendees, which basically, without naming the MOU, it pushed back on the MOU. It did a few things. In that statement, and so reading between the lines, you could see that the Gulf states were actually very upset about the MOU. They said openly that they were not consulted on the contents of it. Even in the MOU, it says that the Gulf partners are going to be brought into an investment fund to help rebuild Iran after the war of $300 billion. And the Gulf states themselves, their foreign ministers, the Saudi foreign minister, the next day was quoted as saying, "We have no idea what you're talking about. We're not investing in Iran." But the Gulf states put out a statement saying that we have to dismantle the proxy networks, that Iran's ballistic missile program has to be dealt with, two issues that were not mentioned in the MOU, and that Iran can have no say in the Straits of Hormuz, whereas in the MOU it gives them a say in the Straits of Hormuz. It basically walked it back. So you see, reading between the lines, Rubio was sent to the Gulf states to clean up the mess that the MOU created. And then he went to Lebanon. Well, he didn't go to Lebanon, but he then brokered the deal between Israel and Lebanon, which walked back another piece of the MOU. And now if we fast forward a few more weeks to where we are today, you can see that Trump has watched the MOU fall apart, declared it dead, and has now basically moved himself into what we could call the Rubio camp. So judging by behavior, Trump basically, here's what I believe happened with the MOU and Vance and Rubio. I think that those who were pushing for a deal, Vance, Witkoff, Kushner, Trump looked at them and said, "Hey guys, you think you can make a deal? I don't think any deal's worth the paper it's written." This is what I believe happened, and this is just my own conjecture. That Trump looked at them and said, "Okay, go for it. You want to make a deal? Make a deal. Promise them whatever you want, because I don't think it's even going to last, because I don't trust that the Iranians are going to hold to a deal. But if you want to make a deal, go ahead and make a deal. I'll stand behind it, and we'll see what happens." And Trump jokingly, twice jokingly said, "Hey, if it falls apart, we'll blame JD." But Trump, we know Trump well enough that when he throws things out like that, he doesn't mind taking a little public dig at someone. And what I think happened is that, because then you saw JD out there defending the deal, going on every talk show defending the deal. Reading between the lines, I think that Trump
selling his book, Rabbi, and selling his book, that was weird.
I think that Trump knows exactly what's going on here. He understands. Look, Rubio is a far more substantive person. I don't know if there's someone else who's going to emerge from the shadows as another candidate, but if it's Rubio and Vance. And then there's the issue that I once brought up on your show a while back that has nothing to do with these issues. Rubio is fluent in Spanish, and the Republican Party is bleeding Hispanics right now. And Rubio could sweep across all those southern states doing campaign on the campaign trail in Spanish and sweep them off their feet. And JD Vance has nothing to offer those people. So I just think if I'm a strategist in the Republican Party, a JD Vance candidacy looks to me like a losing proposition.
The other point I just thought of when you were going through a couple of comments that Trump had made, the irony is that as JD's sitting there on Joe Rogan saying, that all these influencers were essentially responsible for the deal falling apart, what we and others were saying, and I'm no influencer, but I was critical of the deal, and I think deservedly so, Trump then said exactly that in his public commentary. They're scumbags. You can't do a deal with those kind of people, et cetera, et cetera. Trump said the exact same things that most people with half a brain were saying regarding the deal. It wasn't personal to JD. Point. He was pulling apart the deal, and Trump said it himself. Exactly what we were saying, Trump then said.
And they're wired differently, and we're not going to put up with it. We are just going forward. We're attacking them tonight. We're taking out all of their capability for anything having to do with the Strait, with the Hormuz Strait. And I think in the end, we will end up just controlling the whole thing. And what they're doing is being very foolish, very stupid, and they've treated people horribly. They've killed 52,000 protesters so far that we can determine. It might be more than that, but 52,000 protesters have been killed, and it's really a terrible situation.
Maybe Trump is one of those online pro-Israel influencers that JD's talking about. And look, on a serious note, JD Vance is something happened with this guy, because if you go back to when he was campaigning for Senate earlier in his career, he was more pro-Israel. Someone pointed out to me the other day that when he visited Israel as a senatorial candidate, he went to the Western Wall, put a kippah on his head, and then he also went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, etc. But when he came as vice president, he did not go to the Western Wall. Did not go to the Western Wall. And even when he visited City of David and was asked about his visit to City of David, all he said about it was that he wanted to walk on the pilgrim's road where Jesus walked, which is great. It is a very powerful experience for any Christian. But the City of David, the main thing of the City of David is that it's been verified as the palace and the city where King David built his capital. And the only resonance for JD Vance that he said publicly was that he was walking where Jesus walked. I think he was backing away from anything positive about the Jewish nature of Israel.
The other point, I think he was the only Republican to skip Netanyahu's speech as well. And I know it was in the midst of a presidential campaign, et cetera, but I was looking at a list of those who skipped it. He was the only one. And look, there may have been a legitimate reason for it, but I mean, we'll watch with interest. Final question, Rabbi, I note that the Knesset has now dissolved, or whatever the technical term is for that, heading into a busy period of campaigning for Israel. What is your prediction when it comes to the next Israeli government and Netanyahu's future?
Look, there is not going to be a left-wing government in Israel. There simply can't be. The numbers don't add up. And most people outside of Israel who don't really understand Israeli politics assume because we have a right-wing coalition that everyone in the opposition is on the left, and it's just not true. There are parties that are not in the coalition that are to the right of Netanyahu. They just don't like Netanyahu. And there are parties in the quote-unquote opposition that are Arab parties that are openly anti-Israel that will never be part of any coalition. They're just there to be a nuisance. And so because of that, the numbers simply don't add up. The population of Israel has moved to the right over the last 20 years, and that's why we haven't had a left-wing prime minister in over 20 years, and we're not going to. And it's even moved even more to the right since October 7th, and we haven't had an election since then. So the coalition will be a right-wing coalition. It, in all likelihood, will be headed by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And most people outside of Israel don't fully understand this because the media is covering it in very broad strokes, and people don't understand the ins and outs of Israeli politics. This is a much bigger question you asked me than it's not a quick question. We should probably. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing,
I would love
a shameless plug for my channel here is that on my YouTube channel, I just put up a video a couple days ago about the upcoming Israeli election, a first one, but I plan to cover the Israeli election cycle very carefully and really explain to people outside of Israel who all the parties are, how the system works, and really understand the dynamics of what's going on in Israel.
Okay, Rabbi, we're going to put a link to that first episode you did going through the overview, and then my audience, I'm sure, no doubt, will continue to follow your coverage, because I certainly won't be providing in-depth analysis because I've got donuts of an idea, so I'll be watching your channel as well. And hopefully,
I'm happy to come on and discuss it with your audience as well.
And I'll also definitely get you back on. You're amazing. Rabbi, thank you so much for your time and for your voice, as always.
God bless.
Bless you.